There was no respite, no peace, no end in sight. So fuck 'em. Fuck them all. He was gonna make it end. They'd never see this one coming. England wasn't the place to be when you wanted to fight back, but Ash lived in the countryside. His dad had a license for hunting rifles. He knew precisely where and when to start the gunfire, how to take down the most vital targets, the most worthy scumbags, before anyone could rush him from the side and disarm him. I understood. God, did I understand. So while I was sat alone in my garden shed at 8:47 AM on a school day, my suicide note fully written, lying on the chipboard floor next to me, Ash was walking out to his garden shed to find the rifles with which to end his own life, along with as many of his classmates as he could take out. So hello and welcome back, you lovely people, to a very explosive chapter of the Nostalgia Project. I will link all the previous chapters below in case you would like to go see them first or afterwards, but if you do really want to jump in at this very dramatic chapter, then I don't think you'll be too lost. I think you'll be able to keep up. And what can I say? A dramatic chapter called for a dramatic me. So before we start this chapter, I do have to give you a trigger warning relating to self-harm. There is quite a bit of stuff about self-harm in this chapter. What I am going to do though is leave you some timestamps in the drop down if you want to skip over the self-harm stuff. Other than that, I don't really want to give you a big preamble on the front of this chapter because there is a lot in this chapter. I feel like it finally explains everything I've been trying to say for so many years about what it was like to be a bullied outsider in the 90s before the internet. People of this era, they cannot grasp what it did to you and what it did to my boyfriend at the time. The title of this video, I have to give you the backstory here to what drove him to do what he did. And I understood because I'd felt those things and thought those thoughts too, because the 90s before the internet, to be an outsider with mental health issues was something that I've failed at explaining to people for so many years, and having written it down now, I feel like you might get it. I feel like you might finally get it, so I'm really happy with this chapter. As such, I am going to stop waffling and start reading to you. So this chapter is called Ash's Secret, aka my boyfriend, the school shooter. Let's go. I wish I could tell you how it went, the transition of Ash from that weird boy at the club into Ash, the center of my teenage world, but honestly, I don't remember every step of the way, because we weren't stepping, we were whirling. Both of us were depressed, bullied, outsiders, and in the 90s, the early 2000s, that meant something so very different. If you weren't there, if you didn't live it, I don't think I can ever make you understand, no matter how hard we both try. Little fetus, if you were a loner, awkward, picked on, depressed, eating disordered, and self-harming, you probably found a forum, right? Found other people who got it, got you. At the very least, you had entertainment to take your mind off it. Games and videos and pictures, comment threads below everything, where people chatted, connected, related. A lot of you tell me that I'm your goth elder sibling, and I'm honoured as fuck by that. I love that I can be that for you, because there was no one to be that for me or for Ash. So here we go. Let me try. You wanted to understand, right? So go stand by that door. It'll lead you straight through into my 90s bedroom. Now, hand over your phone, close your eyes, and take one big step through the whirling vortex of time. The room you've stumbled into, its walls are green and blue, and it's sparse as a halfway house. Look around. Look for the entertainment. You won't find it. There's no computer here. No phone, mobile or otherwise. No consoles, no TV even. All you've got now and forever, is a CD player, an incense burner, and some rumpled old books. You'll make it a few hours, I reckon, before the madness, the isolation sets in. But have a go. Feel free. It's your room now. Spark up a stick of Nag Champa, put on Nirvana's In Utero, or the Sex Pistols' Never Mind the Bollocks. You'll find those close to hand, always. Sit and swing in my enormous hammock chair. Pick up the nearest book. It'll be Melvin Burgess's junk, no doubt. About a teenage couple who ran away from the tedium of their sleepy little hometown in the late 1980s, then got addicted to smack, never quite knowing if they loved each other or just the drug. And the boredom, the fuck, I'd do anything to feel different, to feel something, to feel good again vibe that oozes from every page of that book. It probably hits a little close to home right now. Hell, maybe you're already done with this experiment just 3 hours in. Maybe you've had enough. Maybe you open the door, call out for me. Tell me you got the point already. The 90s were boring, got it. You'd like to get out of here now. But the house just echoes emptily back. There's no leaving this place, silly. Time travel isn't real, and a wish can never be retracted. You wanted to understand, didn't you? You liked the sound of the 90s, you told me. So I left you there, slap bang in the middle of all of it. Right where you said you always wanted to be. That era you wished you'd been born in. But I guess you never read the fine print, did you? For the next few hours, you and I both know you'll keep thinking about the internet, about how you'll tell all your friends about this cool 90s experiment, the way you unplugged for a day, until you remember that those friends don't exist anymore. Everyone you knew online, whether they're a long-distance friend you share deep late-night conversations with, or an anorexia forum confidant, or a YouTuber who cheers you up sometimes. All of them are gone forever. They never existed. Everything we ever shared. It was nothing more than a weird dream. Gone too is every form of distraction you ever had. No more selfies and filters, no more apps, no more shopping, no more Netflix. And here's the real kicker. The only people in your whole wide world now are the kids at your school. And if you're anything like me, like Ash, they all hate your guts. No, hate is too nice a word. Hate suggests a potent emotion, an equal footing, and you're way, way less than that. You're an untouchable here. You make people want to puke. Every aspect of your appearance, your voice, your accent, the way you walk, the things you say, the clothes you wear, the way you smell, every aspect of you is loathsome beyond description. Your whole school, your whole town, your whole world agrees on that. All day, every day, you live on guard, hypervigilant, hiding behind your hair, hunching your shoulders against the never-ending onslaught of threats, mockery, and violence. And when you finally run back home, slam the door behind you and hurry through the porch till you're safely invisible to that violent world outside on the verge of tears, while there's nothing, no one waiting. There's no online world to confide in, no forum buddies to understand, empathize, no YouTube or Netflix to give you advice or take your mind off it. Nothing. You're alone in this. Alone in the world. The state you existed in all day, verging on a panic attack, stressed to the max, terrified, on the edge of tears or of ripping your skin off with your nails. It never goes away. There's nothing to take it away. Nothing but self-destruction. And only the kiddie versions. The only things you can do at that age. Starve yourself, cut yourself, binge and purge. And even then, when you fall into its darkest reaches and find you can't stop, there's still no one to talk to. No tips and tricks. No harm reduction. No recovery advice. No, it is okay to not be okay. And no matter what your bullies say, me and Toothless are telling you you are perfect just the way you are. Messages online. There's none of that. Online doesn't exist. You are alone now. This is the 90s. Isn't it everything you wanted? Isn't this what you asked for outside my bedroom door when you traded your phone for my memories? Never trust a wish granter. There isn't a chink of light in this never-ending tunnel of isolation, violence, and self-destruction. There's no evidence that your life will ever be any different to high school, or that the world outside is any different to this, no matter how far you run. You start to believe you're the only screwed up kid on the planet, a fucking alien abandoned on the harshest rock in the galaxy. So, look, if it gets too much, I left you one thing. The only thing I could. Take a look inside the cupboard. Don't pick up that rusted, blood-stained razor blade. That's mine, and it's dirty. Delve deeper, and you'll find the only safe outlet that remains in this world you stupidly asked me for. Pens and paper, and a little piece of me, too. Just one other fucked up kid in this awful, rotten, lonely world. I left you all of it. That whole sack full of misery. Mine, just like yours. Some of it's written in pen, but a lot more's in caked on, splattery teenage blood. Pages and pages of tear-stained, blood-smudged desperation. Again and again I wrote, what did I do to deserve this? I don't want to die, alone and forever misunderstood. I don't want to live anymore. There's so much life stretching on, ahead and behind, like drowning in a never-ending sewer. I don't want to die alone and forever misunderstood. This was the world Ash and I grew up in. We'd been so utterly, indescribably alone all our lives, so helplessly lost when it came to dealing with our crippling depression, or the hatred dished out to us every second of every day by every face around us, that when we found each other, found another human who showed us love instead of contempt, and more than that, understood all of it, everything we'd been through, then accepted every atom of our damaged souls, it was like finding a member of your own species after being locked in a cruel zoo your entire life. Like we'd stumbled upon a fountain after decades in the desert. We drank each other in, merged into one conjoined being so fast and so indestructibly, it's impossible to extricate every stitch that one by one wove us lovingly together. Our second date took us back to Eddie's the very next weekend. My second trip to the haunted fish tank. This time I pulled out all the stops, strapping myself into the 16 buckles on my skyscraper 8-inch heel black gloss stripper boots. And I left my lipstick firmly at home. Now I had a boy to kiss. With my insane boots on, I was 6 foot tall, taller than Ash, who was on bare feet, just 2 inches above me. He was insecure about that, but I preferred it. Every one of my significant others has been between 5'6" and 5'8". It's the perfect height. Who wants to perpetually converse with their partner's nipples, never be able to reach over and nip their neck or kiss their hair without climbing them like a tree. And when you wear your hugest heels, they'll be just below you. And you'll get to feel like the tallest, most willowy supermodel on earth. Try it sometime. If you call yourself body positive, that includes cutting the shorter guys some slack. I reckon you'll love it, actually. It's friendly, being on a level with the person you love most in the world. Always being able to look him in the eye, see what he's thinking, whisper in his ear. And Ash was irresistible that night, back in his smudgy eyeliner, wearing a black top with these cut-out shoulders that revealed tantalizing hints of pale skin, collarbones, and the effortless, perfectly toned musculature of his shoulders. That night was the very first time we ever danced together. Ash grinning away, mouthing the lyrics back at me, his blue-green eyes glowing eerily under the black light, teeth luminous as a contented Cheshire cat. They really went for it with the blacklight back in 2001. I glowed like a firefly from eyelashes to hair. Blacklight was, and still is, magic to me. The point, though, that Ash and I went from testing the waters into more than that, a lot more, was this crystal clear moment that we were standing in the gloom by the dance floor, and the slit open shoulder of his black top dropped just low enough for me to glimpse the dark lines of a hashed up mess of fresh cuts, this scabbed up tally chart sliced into the pale skin of his upper arm. My autistically unsubtle and slightly drunk, verging on demented response was to grab his arm, pointing excitedly at what I'd just seen, while yelling over the music, "Oh my God, you do that too?" Yeah, I know, it sounds today like an awful thing to do. Crass, rude, a bizarre way to respond to someone's visible mental health struggles, but in my 3 years of self-harming, I'd never, ever met a fellow cutter, never experienced any level of understanding, and now here was Ash of all people, the beautiful boy I'd been so nervous about getting naked in front of solely because of my scars, and now I'd realised there was nothing to be scared of at all. I was overexcited to the nth degree. There was so much to say, so much understanding to revel in, but unfortunately the music was loud, very loud at the precise second of my outburst. Ash didn't hear a word I said. All he registered was me grabbing his injured arm, jabbing my finger aggressively at the cuts he'd just failed to hide, then screaming in his face. The look in his eyes was utter horror, defensiveness. He yanked his sleeve back up, tugged his whole body away from me, and was beginning a litany of excuses. "It's not a big deal. I hardly do it at all. They're not deep. Leave me alone." Until I whipped down what looked like a Victorian mourning band wrapped around my own upper arm, formed from a hacked-off portion of opaque black tights. And I showed Ash the hashed-up mess of my own teenage flesh, deeply scarred and rescarred, angry purple keloid welts crashing in every direction, glowing faintly under the black light the way fresh scars do, barely room left for the freshly scabbed-over cuts that sat atop the mess. There was a long, silent moment. Then Ash looked back from my arm to my face, and his defensiveness melted into a wry smile, a nod. He knew I wasn't on the attack. I never would be. I got it, too. We took a seat on the edge of the dance floor stage, passing a can of Red Bull back and forth. And for the first time in my entire life, I talked about all of it. The depression so acute it became a physical pain, the addiction to self-destruction, this enormous crushing secret we both planned our every outfit around, because hiding cuts was essential in those days. Self-harm wasn't understood back then, not the way it is now. In the 90s, no one, And I mean no one at my school had ever heard of, conceived of the idea of taking a razor blade and deliberately cutting oneself. The idea only occurred to me after seeing the infamous Richie Edwards interview pictures, wherein a pushy interviewer had questioned the notoriously fragile Mannix lyricist over the sincerity of his band, his lyrics, his poetry. And Richie, in response, had pulled a razor blade from his pocket, then slashed the words "for real" into his own flesh, so deeply the cuts gaped wide, pissed blood all over the hotel carpet, and he had to be rapidly escorted to the nearest hospital to get his arm stitched back together again. But not before he'd stood, smiling mischievously, for a photograph, his mutilated arm bleeding into a towel, cuts bared for the world to see, those big dark eyes lit up with the high of endorphins, and knowing he'd just made a political move that would go down in fucking history. Ever after that day, Richie was hounded in interviews about his mental health and, above all, his self-harming. He explained that it made him feel better. It helped him focus, got rid of negative emotions, and, well, I was an undiagnosed Aspie with clinical depression. Wasn't like it could make me feel worse, was it? So I tried it one night with a razor blade, just like Richie. That first experience was pure terror. I had no idea yet that razors didn't just scratch, they went through flesh like it was butter. My first cut gaped open to the extent I still bear the scar 22 years later, far longer than I'd even been alive at that point. I was convinced I was going to die of blood poisoning by morning, and spent the majority of the night panicking and praying to a god I didn't even believe in, but when I didn't die that night, and it healed up just fine, I got over my fear and found myself lured back again and again, until the cold, slashing sting, the bright crimson droplets, and the endorphin high that followed became an inescapable addiction. But hiding cuts, like I said, that was important in the 90s. Because cutting wasn't just unknown to most kids, it was unknown to all grown-ups. And that meant, if your parents found out, it wasn't just a trip to the therapist and a typical troubled teen they'd see. It was a violent, cannibalistic lunatic who needed locking up permanently. I shit you not. When the first kids at my school found out I self-harmed, they looked at me like I'd just cut off one of my own toes, smothered it in ketchup, and then eaten it. Cutting yourself on purpose was the maddest thing they'd ever heard of in their shallow, sheltered little lives. And if that was the reaction from fellow teens, just imagine how it would have gone over with actual parents. Even other goths didn't know what to do or say about a self-harming friend. Sometimes I showed up to clubs with fresh gaping wounds visible through my tights. People would stare, openly, but no one knew what the fuck to say, especially not about wounds as recklessly severe as mine, given I was, as with all my future addictions, ludicrously, naively competitive. If I was going to be an anorexic, then I had to be the most emaciated one on the forum. If I was going to do drugs, well, it had to be intravenous heroin. And if I was going to cut myself, then I was going to butcher myself. Kids, please don't do this. People will either take you seriously and look after you when you just say the magic words, "I really, really need help." Or they won't take you seriously, no matter what you do. No matter how thin you get or how deep you cut. Don't try to communicate through starved, mutilated flesh the way I did. It doesn't work. It never works. But I didn't know that back then. Neither, I guess, did Ash. As we sat on the edge of the dance floor, comparing the mishmash of cuts and scars on our left arms, the camaraderie deepened, thickened, bonding us together like clotting blood, like a knitting scab. Ever after that night, we knew we could be real with each other. Any time about anything, nothing was off limits. It was okay to not be okay, and Ash had a lot of reasons not to be okay. He was out of high school, sure, away from those bullies now, cruising the easy youth existence of the 90s with its culture of Jackass and CKY and American Pie, where kids slacked off, lived the lazy life, and never caught any shit from their parents because everyone knew it'd all be fine in the end. May I present the world before 9/11, the world before the financial crash. 90s kids were raised to stroll the lush financial pastures of the boomer generation. Then the rug was ripped out from under our feet. Back then, though, Ash just worked a few hours a week at a local gas station and attended the very occasional college class. Things weren't tough now, away from his hellhole school. But 3 years ago, his dad had come driving home from work, driving along a stretch of road newly laid with gravel. Too much gravel. He'd always been a fast driver, something Ash had inherited, and as he took the familiar bend through the ample woodlands round their home, the gravel beneath his wheels went skittering sideways, sent the sports car skidding, soaring, fishtailing off the road. In less than a second, he went from being Ash's dad to nothing more than a disaster of mangled, twisted metal, wrapped headlong around a tree. He died on impact. Ash had been close with his dad, super close. He had the kind of dad who always knew when there was something up with him, with school, with the bullies. Like the time Ash got so sick of being picked on, he decided nothing mattered anymore. Nothing. He was taking a stand. England wasn't the place to be when you wanted to fight back, but Ash lived in the countryside, and his dad had a license for hunting rifles. There were 2 of the things out in the shed, locked and loaded, for pheasant hunting or just messing around in the woods. So Ash made his plans, like so many other messed up kids whose names would be splattered the next day across chilling newspaper shots of bleeding children dragged from the gunshot windows of schools like Columbine. And Ash, as he readied those guns, made his plans. He was about to become just another one of those kids, a seminal one, in fact, the very first British school shooter. He dressed for school on the allotted day, knowing it was to be his last. For just like Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, Ash saw no point in living on through this miserable life, just to go to jail for his sins. His life was shit, the world was shit, and Ash just wanted out. But he wasn't going alone. He wasn't letting the sons of bitches who'd driven him to this keep on breathing while he had to lose his life. How was that fair? How was any of it fair? Those taunting, violent scumbags had wrecked every drop of self-confidence he'd ever had, drained every atom of joy from his world, and every single day he had to keep schlepping back to that hellhole for more. There was no respite, no peace, no end in sight. So fuck 'em. Fuck them all. He was going to make it end. They'd never see this one coming. Ash got dressed for school, smiling the first smile he'd smiled in too many years to even count. It was like the sun was finally coming up after the endless dark of winter. An end was in sight. Retribution, then peace. Thank God. He'd planned it all out, of course. He'd thought of little else during the past week of miserable, endless school days. It was these thoughts, these plans, that had held him together. He knew precisely where and when to start the gunfire, how to take down the most vital targets, the most worthy scumbags, before anyone could rush him from the side and disarm him. A rifle wasn't ideal for a mass shooting, but there were ways. And Ash had dwelled on those ways for night after sleepless, lonesome night. Ash was an Aquarius, the most peaceful, non-violent person I've ever known. He couldn't bear to see an animal in pain, couldn't even bear to eat one. And he'd never been in a fight in his life. He never even raised his voice to me, to anyone, ever. What must have been done to him at that school to drive him to this? It had clearly been absolute torture, and just like me, at the age we met, he was wholly bereft of empathy for human beings. People equal shit, read the Slipknot mantra of the day, and that, honestly, was how we saw it. I didn't feel compassion for other people. How could I learn to, when all I'd ever been shown was hate? And so it went for Ash. I understood. God, did I understand. I'd wished long and hard for a way to enact the same sick plans, visualizing in gory detail my bullies with their kneecaps blown out, dragging themselves bleeding and begging across the floor, only to have my laughing face, my cruel taunts, be the final karmic images imprinted on their dying retinas at the bloody ending of their rotten, remorseless little maggot lives. But I was impotent in my vengeance, while Ash, like I said, he lived in the country. His dad had guns. So while I was sat, alone, hiding, in my garden shed at 8:47 a.m. on a school day, my blazer slung over the lawnmower, a razor blade held over the naked blue veins of my bared wrist, my suicide note, fully written, lying on the chipboard floor next to me, hesitating tearfully as I wondered how long it would take before anyone even found my body in the dusty quiet of this darkened shed. While I was doing all of that, Ash was walking out to his garden shed to find the rifles with which to end his own life, along with as many of his classmates as he could take out. Only when he got there, the bullets were all gone. Nothing was ever said in Ash's family about those missing bullets and the clear reason for their sudden and complete removal. Not on that day, nor on any day after that, but somehow, some way, Ash's dad saw what was coming. He didn't talk to his messed up son, just the same as my parents didn't talk to me. It wasn't a therapy era, England, in the 90s. He just took the bullets away, and that was that. What the fuck was Ash meant to do without bullets? He couldn't get a gun of his own, or any bullets, not in this country. And while he briefly considered a knife rampage, it was futile. He knew he'd barely managed to stab one person, probably non-fatally, before everyone piled on and stopped him. No retribution and definitely no suicide, just a long, long stint in juvie, with the bullies laughing all the harder. No, the whole thing was futile. It was pointless. So Ash completed high school, graduated, never killed a soul. Got over it, as much as you can ever get over that kind of thing. So the next time the NRA try to tell you all that stuff, that guns don't kill people, people do, remember this. Remember Ash, his bitterness, his determination, his elation to have it all over with. Because I can picture his face, splattered in grainy black and white across the front page, the first British school shooter, another violent, crazed goth. It could easily have been the only way I would ever have come to know Ash. Through his infamy, through his pretty face frozen in newspaper print above that lurid act of retribution. But all it took was the removal of every bullet in the house, and after that, the entire future shifted. Ash lived. A whole bunch of kids lived. Goths everywhere weren't tarred with further stigma. And I got to meet the first boy I ever really loved. So that was the kind of relationship Ash had with his dad before he died. They were important to each other, big time. His dad sounded great, honestly. Ash was pretty sure the guy had grown weed in their garden, while he was still young enough not to know what it was. He remembered the funny-smelling smoke, the mischievous giggling of his parents out on the porch in the evenings. His mum was still in bits about it, on a Valium script, which Ash sometimes nicked a bit of for recreational purposes. His sister wasn't doing great either, enraged that their mum had already moved on, found herself a new man who, to really, really cap it all off, had the same first name as their deceased dad. He'd been replaced by their mum, wholesale, in name, in bed, in everything. Ash's sister fumed about that for long, long years, until, well, I won't ruin it, but let's just say fate is a very interesting animal. So that was Ash's story, the reason behind the hashing of cuts on his skinny left arm. It made my own story seem pretty shit, frankly, pretty underwhelming. All my parents were alive. I had a wealth of parents, including my live-in stepdad, his ex-wife, who became my stepmom, and my dad's eternally rotating parade of girlfriends and mistresses. I had my own shit, my own story, mostly dating back to one particular event and a scattering of more minor ones that we won't recount in this book. Let's just say there was a member of my family who crossed certain lines, and crossed them often. It wasn't the worst thing to happen to anyone ever. Wasn't even as bad as you're probably imagining. But it was bad enough, combined with the divorce, the custody agreement that shipped me up and down the country like unwanted garbage, the endless bullying, isolation, and self-imposed house arrest, and above all, the undiagnosed Asperger's. It was bad enough, in total, to fuck me up more or less permanently. Even Ash was more open about his dead dad, about his nearly school shooting, than I was about what happened to me. I couldn't put it into words at that age. The shame was too much. The rage was too much. If I tried to put it into words, even to Ash, it would rip me apart from the inside and I'd never ever come back again. So I just told him who the bad guy was, and Ash was wise enough to leave it at that. I doubt there was time enough for all these conversations, these bits of history, that first night at the haunted fish tank, perched together on the side of the stage, sipping Red Bull's artificial strawberry glucose fizz. But we talked enough that night, and on all the nights that followed, by text, over ICQ, to turn the knitted scab of our new relationship into a permanent ridge of smooth, strong scar tissue, bonding us together for life, or nearly so. And the haunted fish tank, that beautiful gloomy room full of smoke and blacklight and music, it was on every Friday night, a standing date. It was only a matter of time before we wanted, like all lovesick teenagers, to give that date its proper ending. And since Ash lived closer to the city than I did, I was going to his place, and I was staying the night. Just like before, I lied to my parents. Ash lied to his too. To my mum, 20-year-old Ash was newly 18. To Ash's mum, well, he neatly evaded the question of my age altogether. After all, he'd met me in a nightclub, And to the sensible parental mind, there would never be a 16-year-old high school kid slinking about unchecked in a nightclub. And so it was that I stuffed my clubbing outfit into my battered Adidas school bag, which was covered in arduously hand-sewn band patches of Bauhaus, Nine Inch Nails, Nirvana and the Sex Pistols, plus Tipex-scrawled lyrics galore. Then I got the train out to a brand new station on the other side of the city. Ash was waiting with a big grin on the platform, leading me up the stairs and over the clanging metal footbridge to his little green car. Inside it, he stuffed a Rammstein cassette into the player, and off we went, his clunky combat boots stomping away on the pedals. We rolled through the woodlands as the sun slowly sank over the tall, leafy trees, the electrified neon magic of a Friday night just beginning, butterflies awakening, kindling in my chest. It was a posh area, this, posher than my shithole. The kind of posh that's buzzing with old money, the offspring of rich rock stars, the kind of obnoxious brats without boundaries or limits, the type who pretend they don't give a fuck about anything, then wind up working as high-level bankers 5 years later. And if they get caught in any of their youthful sins, their crimes just slide away on an oil slick of money. They were always hanging out at the pub opposite the station, those snot-nosed towny brats, the beer garden out front stuffed with glossy tans and smooth hair, laughter braying out between the straightest, whitest teeth you ever saw. But if you dodged those glossy clones, managed to find your people, your scene, in that town, it could be a pretty cool place. That town was weed central. What else was there when you had woodlands galore to get stoned in, and fuck all else in the way of entertainment? I took in the dual cultures of this wealthy green oasis as we zoomed through the gathering twilight of the woodlands, Rammstein stomping away on the stereo. Ash reminded me once more that my age was as yet unknown. Ash wasn't much of a liar. Honestly, he sucked at deception and fully planned to break the news to his mum, Taylor, eventually. But he was still waiting for the right moment. His little blonde sister, Lucy, was my age, prepping for her GCSEs just like me. We might get on, he said, because of that, but while my age was still a mystery, better not to bond over it. It's hilarious, really. Looking back on that drive, that conversation, Ash genuinely believed there would ever be a right moment to break the news. He knew only too well how high-strung his mum was, knew also how protective he felt about his little sister Lucy and any bloke that came near her. But somehow he never quite put two and two together. Never foresaw the absolute howling rage tornado his mum would unleash the night she discovered that I was the exact age of her baby girl. And he was about to... Well, Ash, I see the way you keep looking over at me, smiling, your fingers slipping off the gear stick to entwine with mine. So what are you about to? Every turn of the wheels brought us closer to our first real night together. An overnight stay with a boy and a bed in the room. The tension crackled in the warm spring air of that tiny rattly car. We were both starkly aware of what was to come. For my part, I'd shaved everything in sight, then everything out of sight, 3 times over. It wasn't even a maybe now. I was finally going to put paid to that emblem of naivety I wanted nothing more to do with, the most noxious, cringy teenage word of the self-conscious 90s. Virgin. I bit my lip, hid my grin, turning away to the open window to watch the woodlands speeding by, my black and purple hair fluttering in the breeze as I checked and rechecked the final details of my game plan. There was a way to play this cool, and I was gonna ace it. 'Cause I had something up my sleeve, something big. But I hadn't thought about tomorrow, or any of the tomorrows after that. All the many, many tomorrows I was willing to wreck permanently for both of us. That I was about to set in motion decades of regret. The woods flew past the window, dusk gathering in the shadows between the trees. Yeah, I knew how to do this. How to play it cool. My game plan was flawless. And that's the end of this chapter, which took you to quite a few different parts of the fucked up 90s. So yeah, Ash, thank God, never enacted his plans, but believe you me, he was fully intending to, and he was pissed when he found the bullets gone. But I swear to God, his mum and dad, they were psychic, I swear, because there was that time, and even after his dad died, his mum saved his life another time, when he was planning to do something very stupid, and literally at the final second, his phone rang, and she was like, come over and stay the night. I want you to come and stay the night. And she basically ordered him to, and again, she saved his life. It was freaky. Yeah, the next chapter is finally my secret. This chapter was Ash's secret. The next chapter is my secret. A secret that I have never told to anyone in 20 years. So whoever clicks on the next chapter first, whoever watches it to the end first, will be the first person on the entire planet that I have told this secret to. So that's the next chapter. As usual, I will leave my Patreon linked below. $2 gets you in the club, and the next chapter will come out first on Patreon. So if you want to be the first to sneak the secret, uncensored as well. I have to do quite a lot of censorship for YouTube, but the Patreon videos are fully uncensored, advert free, and you get them earlier. So you might want to sign up if you enjoyed this chapter. Huge thank yous to anyone who made it this far and is enjoying this project, because I am enjoying the fuck out of it, dude. Hopefully you got through this chapter without being triggered. The next chapter I'm looking forward to recording it. I'm looking forward to making it. I'm looking forward to coming clean about this secret and finally telling you guys. And just wondering if by some weird streak of fate, the next video where I tell my secret ever wings its way through the internet to the person I should have told this secret to many, many years ago. So yeah, the next chapter is my secret, and I'll see you then pretty soon. So thanks for listening. Over and out. Bye bye.